Hello, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Ross Silver. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Sylva International, and I'm joined today by Ryan Chavez, who's the CFO of Asterias. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ross.
So, Ryan, just we have a few questions for you today. The first is, can you give us an overview on Asterias and its clinical pipeline?
Sure. So Asterias, cell therapy company where we have two technology platforms. Our first one is called our pluripotent stem cell technology platform. And that basically, without getting too technical, allows us to take stem cells and to create any type of cell type that you would find in the human body, and then use them for the disease or indication where those cells would be most beneficial. And so we actually use that technology for our, what I would say, our lead clinical program called AST-OPC1, which right now we're currently in a phase 1/2A study for spinal cord injury. And what we're using in that program is called oligodendrocyte progenitor cells. We call them OPCs,
Mhm.
which we basically administer directly into the injury site of a patient who has suffered a severe cervical spinal cord injury. And basically, these patients are completely injured from the injury site down where they have no functional ability and no sensation. Or in the case of what we call Asia B patients, no functional ability, but very little amount of sensation. But what we do is we administer these OPCs into the injury sites within a certain period of time, typically 20 to 40 days post-injury, where we believe will have the greatest impact. And we put it in there, and the mechanisms of action, or the items that these cells actually do to the human body, they are very beneficial to helping these patients recover arm, hand, and finger function. And
Okay.
so what we've heard from KOLs, Ross, is that if a patient who has suffered this kind of severe spinal cord injury, if they could get any one thing back, it wouldn't necessarily be walking. It would be just being able to use their upper extremities again. Because if they could do that, they could hold a job, they could have increased quality of life, they could do all the things that we take for granted, such as the ability to comb your hair, go to the restroom, partially change your clothes, feed yourself, etc.
Gotcha. So one of the things that I thought was really exciting about Asterias is, and I talk about this a lot in some of the meetings where I speak to investors, is you think of a starfish and the appendage of a starfish, if you were to chop it off, it can regrow, and that's sort of the theory behind the regeneration, and the theory behind regenerative medicine, and specifically speaking to as it relates to Asterias. So just wanted to drop that in. But one thing that people always ask is, differentiation. There's a lot of regenerative medicine companies, and so could you talk a little bit about differentiation and your sustained competitive advantage relative to other regenerative medicine companies who are developing or have commercialized treatments in the areas your clinical pipeline is focused on?
Sure. And, let's, after I do that, for example, with our OPC1 program, we have two other programs, our back programs, which are actually cancer immunotherapies. So we can talk about that in a little bit. But in terms of, our competitive advantages, I think there's several, and some depend on indication. But one is we have a huge IP portfolio, which basically, we've been doing these assets. We started the patent process around them since the early 90s. We've continued to be very active in filing additional patents. And these, stem from composition patents to method patents, but they really do provide us that initial layer of competitive advantage. Secondly, we actually have that process where we can derive any cell type in the body. That's a very complicated process. And if you think about our therapy, we're actually putting cells into the human body, not just a small molecule. And so it's very difficult for companies to come in and do any kind of generic or biosimilar, et cetera. And so, we have such a huge lead, for example, in spinal cord injury, in terms of all the safety we have behind it, the clinical work, the preclinical and the clinical work that we've done. It'll be very difficult. One, the generic or the biosimilar pathway really won't be there for a therapy like ours. And for someone else to come in with their own product and do that level of work, it will take them years, if not longer, to actually get to the point where we are right now. So we just have a huge head start, and there's really not that risk of a generic or something like that coming in. So that's another advantage. And then I think, lastly, we have a lot of trade secrets and know-how. So we do have that patent portfolio, but some of these things are very complex to manufacture, and so we keep some of our advantage in terms of trade secrets and know-how. And the great thing about that is, and I've seen this at a prior company that I was at, there's actually no patent life when it comes to trade secrets. So as long as we can continue to have that be part of our competitive advantage by having the proper controls and protections around our trade secrets, we think that will extend the life cycle of these products for a very long period of time.
Okay, thank you for that.
Does that make sense, Ross?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's a very helpful description. A lot of investors I speak with believe the immediate growth driver for the stock is the company's neurology asset, the AST-OPC1, which you alluded to, the embryonic stem cell derived oligodendrocyte progenitor cells. I guess how will you compete with that compound? And I know you spoke a little bit to that. And then sustain, assuming you achieve the FDA approval. I mean, no one else is really going to have a treatment option like yours, and especially in terms of the mechanism of action. Could you speak a little bit to that, and also what the market could represent upon a prospective approval?
Sure. There's actually no approved therapies for severe spinal cord injury patients. So if we were to succeed, we would be the first approved therapy by the FDA. So we will get, for example, and this is also an orphan product. We've actually gotten orphan designation from the FDA. With that comes along 7 years of market exclusivity, which we would obtain. And so this is a wide open space. These patients, unfortunately, for a long period of time, have had nothing but patient gets injured, then they go through any kind of decompression or stabilization surgery, and then they basically move straight into physical therapy. So we will be that product that allows them to benefit and hopefully regain some of their function in combination with physical therapy. So there's nothing else out there, so we'll be the leader in that space. In terms of market size, people sometimes think that spinal cord injury, that's going to be a really small market. But there's actually 17,000 patients per year in the U.S. alone that suffer spinal cord injuries. And the target population that we're immediately looking at, the cervical spinal cord injuries, there's about 4,000 patients per year in the U.S. alone that suffer this. Now, based on the pharmacoeconomics, a patient that gets injured in their early to mid-20s can have upwards of $5 million of direct healthcare costs that they incur after the injury.
Wow.
So if we can take this person and actually restore the kind of function we're hoping for, we can drop that number dramatically. So even though it's 4,000 patients per year in the U.S., what we would likely, and this is early, but what we would likely be able to price this product for, this would probably be in excess of $1 billion market annually in the U.S. alone.
And another thing, just to drop in here for viewers watching, there's a priority review voucher, which is awarded to various companies, especially working in the orphan disease space. And that's something that you could obviously monetize, and some companies have monetized up to as large as $250 million. So just another kind of, I guess, another piece to your story as well that could come into play. So with the last question, and I do appreciate your time, and I try to keep these as short as possible for these investors, but there's a lot to your story. But why now for a prospective investor? Why should they be excited now to invest in Asterias? I mean, what would be your insight?
Sure. So twofold, and this relates to our programs. One is on our OPC1. For the first time ever, we're having efficacy data rollouts. We've actually had promising early efficacy data, but we have more of that coming out over the next several months and quarters. For example, probably in October, we're going to have our 12-month data for what's called our cohort 2, so our initial set of patients that have received a potentially efficacious dose. And if we're able to show that the early benefits have been sustained or even further improved, we'll be probably the first company to ever show that kind of sustained benefit for these type of patients. And so we're going to continue to have this kind of efficacy readouts occurring over the next several quarters, which will be a big differentiator for our company. In addition to that, we have our VAC program. So these are cancer immunotherapies. I actually think we're getting very little value for those right now, but we do have very promising data for our VAC1 program in AML. And then our VAC2 program is actually going to be entering into the clinic for the first time this year, and probably in the in the imminent future, in non-small cell lung cancer. And if we can get some good safety and immune response data out of that upcoming trial, which, by the way, your audience should know is getting fully funded by an organization called Cancer Research of the UK. Mm-hmm. So it's adding nothing to our burn rates. Mm-hmm. So if we can see positive results in data from that study, this is a broad technology that we can put into several different areas. We can go into new indications. We can go into actually sort of a combination therapy approach with some of the very, I would say, popular technologies that are showing benefit right now, such as the checkpoint inhibitors and the CAR T therapies. Your audience has probably seen that Kite Pharma they're going to be acquired for, I think, just under $12 billion.
Yeah, Gilead.
Gilead, right?
Yep.
And so we aren't getting a lot of attention for our cancer immunotherapy technology, but I think it's just a matter of time. And when we get in the clinic and hopefully see positive data, I think it's really going to open the doors in terms of partnerships, collaborations, and really adding value through that platform as well. So those are some of the reasons that I think are pretty, it's a good time to at least think about Asterias.
Yeah, just for me as personally, and I've been following the regenerative space for almost 15 years, you want to look at the product, definitely differentiated, it's novel. 2, who are the people behind it? Can they get through the FDA clinical process, and do they have the know-how? Check that box off. 3 is, do you have a balance sheet and the ability to fund this, to fruition, and also have the ability to get external capital, which you've been able to do. So you check off the 3 boxes for stuff that we look at, which is why we're excited about Asterias. So Ryan, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on today. For those of you with other questions, feel free to contact either myself or Ryan. We have information available on our website at sylvacap.com. That's www.sylvacap.com. And again, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Ross, thank you very much.
Okay.